This is Retirement News Online. I'm Scott Drake. The longer time one spends in retirement, the harder it becomes to predict the financial outcome. One important consideration, as always, is risk management. Here to talk about this is Eric Scott in St. George, Utah. Welcome back. Eric, I suppose that when most people hear risk, when we're talking about retirement planning, they're talking about or thinking about market risk only. Talk about some of the other risks that need to be considered.
Most people, as you say, think of market risk, but really the number one risk that we even talked about on our radio show this week was income risk. Too many people are worried about what they think they're going to earn or what they're going to lose. But if you have an income plan dealing with the rest of your life, whether you retire at 65, 70, you know what income you're going to receive no matter what happens to the markets, the economy, the interest rates, then you don't have to worry about that market risk at all. That's the first one. The second one that becomes very important is going to be healthcare risk. Now, most people don't want to look at it, they don't want to really deal with it, but at age 65, if you were to live the average age into the 80s, a couple's going to spend about $250,000 in medical and dealing with prescription drugs. The next thing, though, is that's not including long-term care, assisted living, or even home health care. So the next risk that most people don't think about is inflation. And that becomes important because if inflation averaged 3% and you had an income of $50,000 today, 20 years from now, that spendable value is only worth about $25,000 in true costs that you would be spending. So those are some big risks that most people do not think about, and you have to put them in your plan.
So, when you're transitioning a portfolio into retirement, we're taking it out of the accumulation phase, which, typically has more risk involved. And then we kind of minimize the risk, as we get to retirement. Should a retiree be exposed to any risk at all?
That is a great question. And the first thing you have to understand is I go back to the biggest risk, which is income risk. If you take care of your income risk, then you have to look at, on my investment planning side, what kind of risks I want to take. And that plays a part on your age, your health, and what your assets are. I want you to imagine climbing this great mountain, and what you're doing during your working years, you have a paycheck, you're saving money, you get to the top of the mountain, and you feel great. The problem is now you're 65, 66, and if you don't have enough assets, you don't have an income plan, you should not be investing, I believe, in the market. But with the income plan and assets and the age and the health issues are right, then it's okay to have some risk because you want to also try to keep pace with inflation and have some extra spending for vacations and things like that. If you have $100,000 in assets, you probably don't want to go there, especially if you don't have the right income plan. If you have $1 million, $2 million after your income plan, it makes sense for inflation purposes, things like that.
So Eric, you have talked about a lot of risk factors here. How do you manage all that?
That is what I call the $1 million question. It is rough to do that. But what we've done in our practice for years, that I've been doing this for 34 years, is I want you to imagine just for a minute that you are building a brand new home and that you have a blueprint. And then what's the very first thing that goes in? It's going to be a foundation, and it has 4 cornerstones. You need to have a financial house. You need to have a blueprint. You've got to take care of your income plan. Then you got to have safe and secure investments. You also have to know how much, imagine those cornerstones. One is going to deal with how much I need in my savings. Is it 3 months or 12 months? What about if I don't have my auto insurance, an umbrella policy, my home insurance is not at the level it should be and I get sued? That could affect your retirement completely. Same with life insurance, the same with health care. You have to understand all of those risks, and when you do and you build your financial house, then it puts you in the position to be able to enjoy your retirement to the fullest and take place in dealing with the areas that we've been talking about.
Well, one final question. Something we can be certain of is that government's always changing, and that can lead to public policy risk. Now, how do you manage that?
We're going to see changes constantly. In the last few years, we've seen changes with Social Security. We've seen changes with taxes going up. We've seen changes with health care. We're going to see changes. It's going to happen. So what you have to do is first have a plan that makes sure you're okay today in all the areas we've been talking about. I want you to think for just a minute about a marathon runner. When he's running a marathon, he scopes out where he's going to run. He's got 26.2 miles to go. He knows exactly the time it's going to take. He's been training for a long time. But what he does not know is he doesn't know if the weather's normally 80 degrees and goes to 100. That affects his run. What about if there's a rainstorm? What about if it's thunderstorms? Or what about even if there's a huge windstorm and he's running uphill and it's going against him? He has to make adjustments. It doesn't say he doesn't finish the race. He may have a little bit longer time than what he's used to. But even with looking at changes in the financial world, changes that laws may take place, you have to be prepared just like the marathon runner is. Everything's in place. If there's an adjustment, you're ready to make that adjustment and put yourself in a very successful position.
Eric, appreciate your time. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being with you.
My guest has been Eric Scott. He practices in St. George, Utah, and this is Retirement News Online.